Welcome to the video for Chapter 1 of Basic Sentential Logic, Informal Fallacies and Cognitive Biases. This is the first lecture that has to do with content for UCSD Phil 10 Intro to Logic. The topic of this video is basically just introducing the topic of the course. So I'm going to discuss what logic is, and then the specific type of logic that we'll be looking at in the class, formal logic, in particular sentential logic, and then the other two topics we'll be looking at, informal fallacies and cognitive biases. So first up, what is logic? Logic is the study of reasoning, and reasoning is a process of going from some given facts or information or assumptions to some new information, some new statement or something that follows from those. Or to put it another way, it's determining what follows and what does not follow from what. And this will be a little bit easier if we can get an example that illustrates this. So this example, I'm going to call this the pizza argument, and I'll mention it a few times throughout the course. This is real life. I was at LAX once, quite a while ago, waiting for a flight, and there was a family at the gate sitting near where I was. There was a husband, a wife, and two kids, a girl and a boy, and the kids were hungry. So the dad went to go get a couple of pizzas for the kids. The girl wanted a cheese pizza, and the boy wanted a pepperoni pizza. So the dad leaves, he comes back in a few minutes, and he's got two little personal pizza-sized boxes, and he puts them on the table. The girl goes up to the table, picks up one of the boxes, opens it, and sees that it's a pepperoni pizza. She closes that box, puts it back on the table, grabs the other box, and goes back to her seat. She doesn't open up the second box before she goes back to her seat. Now, why did she not open the box? Because she knew it was a cheese pizza even without looking inside the box. How did she know that? Well, she knew that because she went through an episode of reasoning that's kind of like this, what I'll call the pizza argument. So there are two pieces of information that she started off with. Okay, the first one is she knew that the pizza in her hand, this is the second box she picked up, she knew that it's either cheese pizza or pepperoni pizza. How did she know that? Well, because her dad said he was going to get one cheese, one pepperoni. Her dad is usually reliable with these things. When the dad came back with two boxes, he didn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, they were out of cheese," or anything like that. He just came back with two boxes, put them on the table. So that's how she has this first piece of information. The second piece of information, it's not pepperoni. How does she have that? Well, she looked in on the other box, and the first box was pepperoni. So that's how she knows, okay, that it's not pepperoni. Okay. From these two pieces of information, this third piece of information follows. Okay. Now this piece of information, the one in the second box, she could have arrived at that by opening the box and looking at it. Okay, that's one way she could have learned whether it was cheese pizza or not. The point is she didn't have to do that. Even though she didn't look in the box, she knew that it was cheese because of this piece of reasoning that she went through. She had certain pieces of information she started with, and there was some new piece of information that followed from those. And because she knew that, she could just head straight back to her seat without having to look in the box first. Here's another example. Suppose Alice goes away on vacation and asks Bob to water her plants. She comes back and her plants are dead. Bob says, "I don't know why your plants are dead. I watered them twice while you were gone." Alice says, "Well, you couldn't have. You couldn't have watered my plants." Well, how does she know this? She wasn't there. She wasn't watching. She doesn't have video cameras. Okay. Well, she knows it because it follows from other information that she does have access to. And that's what we're going to get. She says, if you'd have watered them, then you'd have had to use the hose. Well, how does she know that? Well, because the hose is the only way to get water to the plants, let's say. But the hose is in the same exact position it was in when I left, right? So the hose wasn't used. Nobody used the hose. From those two pieces of information, she knows that this other piece of information, that Bob didn't water her plants, follows. Okay. So those are a couple of examples of reasoning. Now, why is reasoning important? Well, it governs a huge amount of what you do, classes you decide to take. I mean, big decisions in life via reasoning, but even small things like, deciding that someone didn't water your plants when you asked them to, or deciding on which way you want to drive back from campus based on your knowledge of traffic patterns and things like that. Much of human reasoning is bad. Okay, so not only does it govern almost everything you do, a lot of it is really, really bad. And the bad news is that there's a lot of groups who know that it's bad. They know exactly how it's bad, and they know how to manipulate it, which means that you are manipulable by people who understand your reasoning. They understand the shortcomings of your reasoning, and that allows them to manipulate you, to make you believe what they want you to believe, so that you will do what they want you to do. To the extent that you get better at reasoning, and that's one of the goals of this course, you will be more resistant to those kinds of manipulation. What is sentential logic? So if you look at the textbook, the title of the textbook basically has 3 topics. And the first is sentential logic. So it's basic sentential logic. The second is informal fallacies. The third topic is cognitive biases. But this first topic, sentential logic, this is going to be the bulk of the class. It's the first 4 chapters out of 6 total. Well, what is sentential logic? Well, in many cases, not in every case, but in many cases, what makes a piece of reasoning good or bad is the formal features of that piece of reasoning. What do I mean by a formal feature? Well, first, here's an analogy. You've got a kid who has a face, and the face, there's 2 components of the face, right? The face is made out of certain things, in this case, sort of biomass, human cells, and there's a certain shape, okay, or form. Now you could capture the form. You could just put like I don't know what this is, some sort of urethane or plastic coating, and then when it dries, you could pull it off, and you get something that's kind of the same shape as the face. And then that's a mold. You could sort of fill that mold with other things, and you could get something, like maybe this is plaster, who knows what this is, but it's the same shape, but it's filled with different stuff. Instead of being filled with human cells and biomass of various sorts, it's filled with plaster or wood or steel or whatever. Well, something similar happens in the case of reasoning and argument. So let's go back to the pizza argument. Either the pizza in my hand is a cheese pizza or it's a pepperoni pizza. It's not a pepperoni pizza, therefore it's a cheese pizza. There's a form or a shape that argument has. And it's this, either X or Y, not Y, therefore X. And this form, this shape, in this case is filled in with a certain kind of stuff. And here the stuff is sentences about pizza. Okay, and whether the pizza is cheese or pepperoni. But you could take this same shape, the same form, and you could fill it with a different kind of stuff. So for instance, I could say, either it will rain today or I will have to water the garden tomorrow. It will not rain today, therefore I'll have to water the garden tomorrow. Okay? Same shape, but it's filled with different things. Right? It's filled with sentences about rain and watering gardens as opposed to sentences about pizza. So the first part of the course is called sentential logic because the form we're going to be looking at is the form you get when you replace the sentences with variables. So if you look at these variables X and Y, these variables stood for sentences about pizza or about rain falling or watering the garden. More advanced courses in logic will break structure down into smaller components. So names, predicates, quantifiers, modals, things like that. But those are basically built on the same tools that we're going to be starting to build in this course. So that's the first of the three topics, sentential logic. The second topic, informal fallacies. This is chapter 5. These are common patterns of reasoning that are often bad, and when they're bad for reasons that aren't formal reasons. Okay, meaning that if you took the content out, if you removed the sentences and what they meant from the piece of reasoning, you wouldn't be able to tell that it was bad. The problems arise because of the specific content that is being discussed in the argument. So for example, this is a so-called false cause. This is one of the fallacies we'll be looking at. It's a bad piece of reasoning where people move from a certain kind of correlation to a specific kind of causal claim. So every time D'Angelo Williams carries more than 30 times, the Steelers win. So all Tomlin has to do to keep the Steelers winning is to give the ball to Williams at least 30 times a game. This is a bad argument, but the reason it's bad has to do specifically with the fact that some of these sentences are about a correlation and about a causal claim, right? So if you removed all that, you wouldn't be able to see why it's a bad argument. So that's going to be the second topic, chapter 5, these informal fallacies. And I think altogether we're going to look at 10 or 12 different informal fallacies. The third topic, chapter 6, the last topic, is cognitive biases. And these are psychological influences on belief formation that often lead to people holding erroneous beliefs, just believing false things. So we're going to look at 6 altogether, but just to give you an idea of what a cognitive bias is, I'll talk about very quickly, just give you an idea of what 2 of them are. So the first, I think this is the first of the biases, first of the 6 we're going to look at is confirmation bias. And this is a bias where people tend to stick to whatever beliefs they have because they want to confirm the beliefs that they already have or that they want to hold. And the way this works is that they will seek out information that confirms those beliefs, but they won't seek out information that disconfirms those beliefs. Or they will they're more likely to remember anything that confirms their belief, but to forget stuff that's inconsistent with their beliefs. They will, you get the idea. They will discount or explain away stuff that's inconsistent with what they believe, but make a big deal about anything that is consistent or supports their beliefs. The second thing we're going to, or another example of a cognitive bias that we're going to look at is implicit gender bias. And there's 2 parts of this I want to remark on. First is gender. This type of bias shows up for pretty much any social category. So it shows up for gender, it shows up in race, it shows up in age, culture, religious affiliation, all kinds of social categories. You can see this sort of bias. But we don't have a huge amount of time in this course, so I'm going to focus on gender bias. But the sorts of biases that we see in gender, just be advised that these also appear in the case of race and a lot of these other categories. What's this word implicit? Well, here's what that means. Implicit gender bias isn't about people who are just overtly sexist or racist or whatever. There are plenty of people like that. There's plenty of racists and plenty of sexists out there who just think that, this race is better than that race or whatever. That's bad, but that's not what this is about. This is about something more subtle, which is people's beliefs about these things, even subconsciously. So even people who aren't racist, even women, for instance, who are feminists, who are real feminists and who really believe in gender equality, you can show that subconsciously they have certain biases against women. They're not aware of it, but it's one of the things that you can show. Same thing with race, right? So it's not the explicit racism or explicit sexism. It's these implicit factors that are going to be the topic of implicit gender bias. So that gives you a basic idea of what we're going to be talking about in this course, the three main topics, what logic is, and these three different things we're going to be looking at to get at reasoning and how to make it better. And that's it.